to read from a new manuscript tonight, as she did for the Gloucester Writers' Center 2 years ago in April 2014. At that time, she read from her book, A Woman in Pieces Crossed the Sea, about the Statue of Liberty, published in 2014. That book won the Patricia Clark Smith Poetry Award. She will read tonight from Three Hands None, an epic, experimental, long poem about a violent encounter that she experienced many years ago. It is an impressive piece, understated, poetic, visceral, vividly portrayed. A courageous and original work, it reminds me in some ways of her cautious, ethereal, experimental book, The Telling, published in 2014. These two books, The Telling and Three Hands None, address different incidents but reflect a common desire, as Denise has mentioned, to look at the unspoken parts of events, to look behind. With this new work, her voice again revisits and explores the unknown closely, literally stopping time. Although not everything will be understood or revealed. This work describes the experience in narrative poetics, in the words and with the observations of the woman being terrorized. The symptoms of trauma are here. What I noticed after my first reading was a double consciousness, the narrator and the young woman who was the victim of an attempted rape. The narrator or speaker is treating the woman herself so tenderly that I sensed healing may have been a consequence of writing this poem. How can we really remember? How do we slow things down? What is necessary to get beneath the surface of emotional experience and the events of our lives? In the four quartets, T.S. Eliot makes a case for returning. He writes, "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." There is great hope in return. There will be growth because everything changes. We change, and the circumstances of our lives have evolved. We see more and differently. How deep can we go? How many layers and fathoms beneath the surface can our minds and our hearts take us? Chickasaw poet and writer Linda Hogan has said, "We must find new ways of knowing. When we head back, we are part of a circle, and the circle is not apocalyptic. The circle contains hope." Denise, thank you for this important work, and welcome tonight.
Thank you, Dorothy. And I'm really, really glad to be here. Can everyone hear me all right? In 1971, I was attacked in my bed in the middle of the night by an intruder. The manuscript is called Three Hands None. He had 3 hands, I had none. Where were my hands? Where were they? Under the cotton sheet. His 3 loud hands shouted precise, non-negotiable commands. His knife blade hand, his hot blinding flashlight hand, his granite weight hand crushing my lips against gums and teeth. His hands stuttered filth in the eloquent language of power. Look at hands. in uniform salute, waving from chandeliered balconies over town plazas, tossing benedictions, pushing round red buttons behind closed oak doors, pulling round red triggers, throwing darts at paper wall maps, manicured fingers snapping, snap, snap, snap. He knew my eyelashes, the clearasil dot on my cheek, the rhythm my nostrils bellow in unchecked sleep, my lower lips tremor. He knew in a split second what a lover takes months to see. He knew my Adam's apple's shallow throb and my throat's spasm at the touch of the blade. His, say it, his blade. I fought back by waiting. The chokehold of stop time stretched, compressed, a rapidly fraying rubber band. Crickets swore off middle of the night jabber, common grackle sing-song drowned in swelter. His rasping voice on his whitewater breath crashed against my face. His words I heard from deep inside my ears. My hearing I had swallowed whole. From the outside, it sounded like what it looked like. Barks, then screams. Barks, screams, then a door's nasty creak. It looked like desperation's aftermath. It was aftermath. He fled. There was no one but me, the dog panting, and me. In the belly of night, where was I? I had simply gone to sleep with an inch of May breeze. From the outside, barks, screams, pounding silence. Someone called the police. I called the police. 911, police. Then, catch as catch can, men went to bed with baseball bats, and women kept bulbs burning. Photos of men, was it this one, that? I tell them I hadn't seen his face. The flashlight melted my eyes. Mug shots again, was it this one, that? I hadn't seen. Did I smell his breath, his underarm stench, his filtered or filterless? Did he smell me? He watched me. He locked my face naked in detention. He knew who I was, knew me when I crossed the street, knows who I am, knows this is me, knows me. In the grocery aisle, he sees me, stripped to less than essence. He held me down, the heft of his hand, the precise edge of his blade, squeezed me, pierced me, emptied me of substance. I am not playing here with agency. This is what powerless is. Bare bones, nothing. Bare bones and muscleless, skeleton collapsed. Lunch became bread and water. Motion was turning my head to look at the door, watch the door. Thought was imploded chaos. Speech was a pageless lexicon. Sleep was a useless plan. Exhaustion buzzed like a swinging hive. My home, my skin locked me out. Breakfast was a sip of juice. Supper was bread and water. The week after, a fruit. What now? I waited. Tea, teacup, teapot. Rubbing the dog's forehead when it let me. Sleeping noon to 3, up all night. The apartment bright as a penny arcade. Dull or acute, my choice, and I chose depending on the day. as I had chosen to obey his blade. Silence rings through the arcade, when after I leave I stay alone with the wary dog who can't wait to be rid of me. Home is skin, but I couldn't inhabit my skin. Empty limbs, empty head, empty pelvis bowl, pockets behind scapulas, cage around liver and lung, ringing in my ears drain down my hollow tube neck. No one inhabited my skin, a vicious biting no one inhabited my skin. Airtight, insulated pores, nothing seeped in, leaked out. Inside me, the hard, shrunken kernel of what I had been rattled like a single shriveled bean in a hand-painted maraca. Shake, delay, move, delay, sound. The way I remember the end of the beginning, the dog barked, the man lost his hold, then I screamed. Or after he fled, I screamed. Did he release his hand from my mouth or his knife from my throat? When his hand pressed my mouth, his knife was where? Did he fling the knife onto the bed to empty his hand to press on my mouth and still keep the flashlight's beam blinding? Or did he remove his hand to grab the knife? Redundant, a knife at my throat, a hand pressed over my mouth, sores and bleeding lip and gums. Did he say, "I have a knife, don't scream"? Did he say, "I have a knife, I will kill you if you scream"? I thought, he has a knife, he will kill me if I move, he will kill me. Finally, the dog barked. And from me, a defiant, don't scream, scream. An obedient to self withheld scream, I screamed. After the dog barked, the man fled. Did I call the police? Who called? Told again and again, the story becomes its own citation, its own list of definitions. I stared at my knees in the mirror, lifted one shoulder in a half shrug, raised a hand, twisted at the waist, saw that I am, saw the door behind me. Walked into the living room, touched a chair, book, plant, saw that they were. Dared touch the doorknob, dared wipe the 911 off the phone. Opened the window and listened. Outside where I lived and didn't live, a woman sang. In a city, in a building, in a room, if nowhere else, in a body that was her own. The pod covering the kernel that is all that is left of me shrivels and peels away. The kernel falls to the floor, rolls under the table, sofa, refrigerator, rug, after a bath, rolls under the tub, rolls and disappears. The kernel who I am is mottled pits, ridges, scars, an ordinary look-alike kernel, an energy-depleted kernel. The young woman sleeps for weeks. She sleeps, I sleep for weeks, a waking sleep, though I can't sleep, can't fall or stay asleep. On hands and knees I retrieve the kernel, lock it in my fist, still I don't sleep. Sleep is waking, waking is remembering. I said to no one, stop what you're doing, listen. I was busy full time searching for me. Never begged, asked you or you. How could you know I was a footnote in an ancient volume's chapter? Same old story. I asked no one to stop, listen. I was locked in a soundproof, looks like me skin. I was locked out of the skin, scrambling to get in. At times, I was the skin. In dreams, I straddled an enormous orb that split like a sluggish amoeba. Which side would I ride? Which side would I relinquish? He knows who I am. Each man I pass on the way to work knows who I am. On the sweltering bus, in the corner cafe, in line at the bank, why me? Who was I to him? Who was I? How many days, weeks, or spontaneously once did he follow me? Was I a fixation, a woman who went to bed naked? Or was I a random no one, a no one? Believe me, he didn't know a dog slept at my feet. Did it end for him when he ended it? Or was he the man at the door a week later, pants down, hand on his cock, word on the street, she still lives there, she hasn't moved out yet? Tattered and tight, when did I expose again my skin to light? Kitchen, fluorescent, hallway, incandescent, hazy St. Louis sun. I sweated inside matted wool terror, filthy as a sheep. Sweated even under a flowered cotton sheet. Shed layers, wool, cotton, skin, to where what is left lives when all is peeled away. Naked, and when the spinning slowed, a toe stepped tentatively out. My mouth, my neck, I must say that word, my. I can write pages, but when I write my, I cry. I can write, but when I write my, I cry. Odd, strange, I've told this story 1,000 times. It is me telling it. Me it is about. Me. I write my, and I cry. A 20-year-old woman alone in a tiny speck of bed, deep inside sleep, wakes up to a man with a knife at her throat. My is the distance the knife traveled to slash the kernel of her being into pieces. My is the nanosecond, minute lifetime. My is eternity's heft. He leaned on my chest, his elbow in my rib, one hand over my mouth, his 3 hands, one on my mouth, one with the knife, one holding the flashlight so close my eyes were on fire. A friend tosses in compassion, society, circumstances. I tell her, I don't care. I don't care. Born into a tangled skein of backstabbing brothers, so what? Wrestled under the seesaw, kicked in the face on the slide, I don't care. Don't cry, tough it out, no dolls, God forbid, no lamb chop, but plastic characters whose names end in Thrawn and mutant ninja transformers. I don't care. High fives, slaps on the back, never an embrace. Do I care? No. Army boot camp, be all you can be. I don't care. My dog would have lived a simple dog life, and I, after 41 years, would be writing about the mockingbird mimicking a cat, or about medical supplies blockaded from entering Gaza. Do I care if his father left town, his uncle pulled him into the woods? No. What is beaten out of the boy, what is forced into the beaten down boy, so what? I don't care. My hapless dog would be dead today, no matter how I work this through, if I do. He opened wide the window's slit and climbed in. I slept through the rattling, unoiled, half-broken sash cord rollers. I slept through his steps on the floor. A moon was somewhere, and somewhere was rain. Blood on my shirt from my mouth never washed out. Do I care where he came from? No, I don't care. He had a mother, he did. He had a mother. She caressed him at least once, he knew a caress. Do I care? No, I don't care. Why write this now? Another friend asks. I say, to sleep. Find the me back then, and like a chalk-covered schoolgirl, spell over and over her name. Write once and for all, my, over and over until swelled it explodes, our splatters the walls. I say, get this over with and sleep. Go to her. Because here is a bell to ring, ring it. A clean fluffed pillow, sink your sleep into it. A blue shirt, wear it, don't go to bed naked with wet hair. If I am you back then means we are not separate, I am you back then, take me. Because here is your radio, turn it on, AM, FM, shortwave. Because here is your rinsed clean Star Trek mug, fill it and drink. Roam the range of one's instincts. Home. A decades-long arm reaches across a table of crumbs for what little remains of the loaf. A clipped yellow toenail sticks to the rim of the tub. Rain screams like a jackhammer. The police siren bites a boy like a hound. Innocence loses voice to sedition. Home is the range of no feeling, instinctual as that is. Home leans into distortion. Home is slippery truth. Home is the coat that can't keep me warm or dry, buttons and holes I can't align. Home yanks and pulls on its shortened leash to always feel restraint. Go to her wherever she is, on the rocky ridgeline with the view in all directions, on the tar paper roof feeding pigeons cooped in their cage. Find her above the sun spread like desolate roses on the snow. Find her where the sun shirks behind stone and brick before pigeons set out on their missions after they have flown home. Go to her, though she doesn't call, ask, beg, or hint. Go to her, she doesn't know she is waiting. Bring her a siren, bring her a bell, bullhorn, megaphone, microphone, but know she will choose to whisper. Read the verbs on her lips, the spittleless nouns. It's your hanking to talk, don't twist her arm. With a running start, jump over time's chasm and land on her side, intact, pockets stuffed with the fractured present, remedial for you, not for her. Go to the place she calls home, find her hair permed or dyed, waist wider or trimmer, wrinkles gnawing at her cheeks. She'll answer to the very same name in a recognizable let-go laugh. Ha, yes, it's me you found. Now leave. You don't leave. She'll need bandages or a tourniquet to tamp down the reopened wound. Your dime store first aid kit, too meager. Whereabouts you find her is the accurately imprecise catch-all, catch-nothing place. Whereabouts when the young woman's eyes, my eyes, sprang open. Whereabouts when the barking stopped and I could hear the whispers between lines, whispered stories, could hear stories. Women, men who did or didn't, could or couldn't, had or hadn't, were or weren't able to find and flag the landmines, who hopscotched on narrow landmine streets in wide curbless landmine fears. You connect the metal cluster dots. The deflated, dehydrated minute reinflates, rehydrates. Is there room in a room for eternity swelled like a sponge? Eternity scatters in all directions and is stuck in one place. Eternity was the trick of his trade. Empty bottles line the windowsill. Piano wire crisscrosses the window frame. Lights in every room. List of numbers taped to the phone, a hand reach away. Some people sleep with a baseball bat on the mattress, some with a knife near the pillow. I say don't sleep. When you sleep, sleep sitting in a chair, upright. I say tell every lover you scream in your sleep. They mustn't touch you. You scream in your sleep. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. My stomach is, I imagine many of you do not at this point, so it's a hard transition, but thank you. So I met Nicole in 1993, actually in Wellspring. She was at that point a community outreach person, advocate, and I was a very new director at the Hawk down in Salem. We had about 5 people working there, 5 women, and we were serving 23 communities, supposedly, although hardly serving Gloucester and Cape Ann, as some very strong advocates told me at that point. So we were invited by Mary Jane, Berenice, who worked with Nancy Schroyer, to come and talk about domestic violence as a group. And we did, and I was certainly very struck by Nicole at that point. The next thing that happened to us, which was quite amazing, is those were the days when there began to be a little money for domestic violence. And we had an opportunity to ask for money, and I, from the Department of Social Services, and so I went to the Gloucester Prevention Network and also the Wynn Community Health Center. And I went to both directors there and said if we can get some money, will you give us a desk and a phone so we can have advocates. And lo and behold, they did. And then I had the challenge of convincing Nicole to leave Wellspring, which was not an easy thing to do. She was very married to there for good reason. But in the end, she came to work and worked for Hawk and essentially created the Gloucester Hawk office. I mean, with a desk and a phone. And eventually we even had more space and 2 desks. And navigated work with Nicole. But I would just say the story and really about how Tonight came to be and the other big production that Nicole put on In Harm's Way was really Nicole listened to stories for 15 years. And she heard stories of women and children and teenagers and support groups and individually. She listened to people in the community. And she brought those voices forward, as you're going to hear tonight. She also is a writer, and I've gotten to work with Nicole and write with her. And so the combination of an incredible listener, and she continues to listen to those stories today, and an enormous heart and compassion with it, and her writing, really brought forward, and for many of you, I've been In Harm's Way. And I think the power In Harm's Way, and tonight, which you'll also hear from the readers, is really that Nicole brings into the community the voices of women and children and teens. And she brought, sort of the shame, the stigma, the terror, I think, and you'll hear some of that tonight, incredible sadness, but also enormous courage, and really joy about women finding themselves and the struggle they go through to break out. She did it In Harm's Way, and that was in big production in various communities, Lynn and Gloucester a couple of times, and Peabody and Ipswich. And you're going to hear it tonight. The power of the reading then and tonight was also that the readers were not the victims themselves or the survivors, but actually people in the community. And to me, that was the voices speaking out and honoring women and kids and teens that have been through abuse, and to hear their stories. So I personally, and I think the community, thanks Nicole for giving a voice. And you're going to hear some readers tonight who have not been through this themselves. They're not telling their own stories, but they're really bringing forward stories of survivors. So with that, thank you.
1 in 3 women will be beaten or raped in her lifetime, everywhere in the world. 1 in 3.
It takes 1 minute to tell someone you can help.
It takes 1 minute to listen without judgment.
It takes 1 minute to say, I am here. I am right here with you.
Where am I? Oh, nowhere. Just outside. Outside in the van. I try to get out, but he locks me in. He says, sit on the passenger bench, and we drive away. Where have I been? Oh, just outside in the van. Uncle's van. The van with the curtains that close? What does he want? I want to go home. Does anybody know what happened to me? Does anyone care? I run my fingers along the edge of my grandmother's table. I stare hard and dig my nails into my hands so I don't cry. I have to find a hiding place. I lie on my grandmother's couch until under a quilt and I cry. But Daddy finds me. He asks, what's wrong with you? I can't tell him. He keeps asking, and finally he gets angry, picks me up and drops me back down hard. He doesn't have time for little boys who won't tell him what happened. I want to tell him. Ask me again, Daddy. Please ask me again. I stare at the flowered wallpaper as I curl up very tight in my pajamas under the cold sheets. I decide that when I wake up, I will not remember this day. And I don't.
Domestic violence doesn't make sense. It can be small and quiet. It can be a look, a deep sigh, a turn of the head. It can be loud, smashing noises, booming voices, fists thrown, heads bashed. I met Eric in high school. I loved him from the moment I saw him, and I still do. In his heart, he is a kind person. He has always been a good father. I could never use the word batterer. He saved me from the hell of my childhood, and we made a life together. He never really meant to hurt me, but his rage was like a pot boiling over. I learned to see it coming, a hot simmer, and then an explosion. I would always forgive him because I loved him, and I knew he didn't mean it. I knew it would be okay because I loved him so much. My steady beacon of love would save us. People don't understand domestic violence, how silent it can be, how you can't just leave. You can leave a movie theater, but not a violent relationship. If you're lucky, you can escape. In the end, I couldn't save either one of us. We lost everything. After a long night of drinking last January, Eric slashed the back of my neck. The kids were sleeping upstairs. I ran out the back door. I ran until my lungs screamed. I knocked on someone's door. The ambulance came. I was brought to the emergency room and got a restraining order. I spent that night in a shelter for battered women. That was the end of a nightmare. So long, I lost myself. I was not supposed to be a battered woman. I closed my eyes for too long. The violence was like something outside me, like a cloak I hid behind. But my tears never compromised my strength. I am beginning to return to a self I scarcely remember. I run my hand across the back of my neck, and I feel the scar. The raised flesh roots me in my victor self. My guiding scar. and I remember there is a warrior inside me.
Growing up in the Midwest, I was taught to keep life in a neat little box. My father was a Methodist minister, and my mother taught 6th grade. I had an older brother and a twin sister, Charlotte. We were taught to be polite children, keep quiet, make our parents proud. When it was time for college, I chose a university in the Northeast. I did well there. I fell in love my sophomore year. I spent the next 2 years blissfully in love with Margaret. We shared everything. She was from Connecticut, the daughter of a corporate executive and a graphic designer. We alternated holidays and spent them together with our respective families. Margaret was a powerhouse. She always seemed to know exactly what to do. Also, she was drop-dead beautiful. Long dark hair, broad shoulders, deep brown eyes. After we graduated, we got a place in Brooklyn, in Park Slope. Thought about getting married. But somewhere in the middle of November, about a year ago, Margaret became possessive, questioning me about everything. Where are you going? Who are you talking to? What are you wearing? She would look through my phone to see if I was texting or emailing anyone. Once even followed me to yoga class to make sure that's where I was really going. Then she started yelling at me, calling me names, calling me a whore, shaming me. I was so hurt and so afraid. I didn't know what to do. Finally, I called my twin sister, Charlotte, and told her what was going on. I wept and asked her for help. But Charlotte was silent. I could feel her disapproval and maybe even her disbelief. She never said I should be ashamed of myself. But that's what I felt coming from her. Ashamed that I loved another woman. Ashamed that I was being abused. And I realized that she was calling upon the shame that dwelled in our childhood home. The shame that I carried with me throughout my life, the shame that Margaret was now using against me, the shame bullet that imploded and was lodged into my heart, the shame bullet that crippled me and riddled me with shrapnel. A window opened that night, and I'm still crawling through it.
I was a superstar in high school. You know, the smart Asian girl. Good at math, had good language skills, pretty in a way that attracted a certain type of guy. But social skills, none. I was afraid of everyone. I never wanted anyone to notice me. I only had a couple friends. Stay small was my mantra. I got into more colleges than I remembered. I had no idea what to think about it. I just chose the one that gave me the best financial aid package. I was hopeful for a new me, less self-conscious, more confident. I didn't understand how vulnerable that made me. Within the first 2 months, I started going to frat parties with a few of my friends. Everyone was always drunk, myself included. Even now, I can still smell the stale beer, the scent of nicotine, and vomit. One night, we were doing Jello shots, and I got so drunk. I just about lost consciousness. I'm not sure if I was drugged. I still can't remember all the details of that night. I staggered upstairs with Brian, a guy one of my friends knew. By now, I know one thing. He pulled down my pants. He raped me. I can't tell you how many times I've heard the same story, held my friends as they sobbed and told me what happened to them. When I finally got back that night to my dorm, my roommate said, "What were you wearing? Were you wearing that thong?"
You tell me it gets better. It gets better in time. You say, I'll pull myself together. Pull it together and you'll be fine. What do you know? Tell me, what the hell do you know? What do you know? Tell me, what the hell do you know? How could you know?
Till it happens to you, you don't know how it feels. Till it happens to you, you won't know. It won't be real.
You tell me, hold your head up high. Hold your head up and be strong. Because when you fall, you gotta get up. Gotta get up and move on. Tell me, How the hell could you talk? How could you talk? 'Cause you don't know where I walk. Or because you don't walk where I walk.
Till your world burns and crashes. Till you're at the end of your rope. Till you're standing in my shoes. I don't want to hear a thing from you. Not from you, because you don't know.
Till it happens to you, it won't be real. Till it happens to you, you won't know how I feel.
I'm the woman who wasn't invisible. Nice car, beautiful children, private schools, handsome and charming husband. But he was the son of a batterer, and he paid it forward. I carried his secrets, and they burned my soul. He never seemed to doubt himself, yet most of the time I had no idea who or where I was. He controlled everything about me. But I was used to that. Eventually, he took possession of my mind. I believed everything he said. Gaslighting, they call it. Manipulated to the point where you start to doubt your own sanity, your safety, your sense of self. That was me. And it was all covered up with money. Lots and lots of money. The lawyers he hired who used my breakdowns as revenue to bleed me out. And then they took my son, my beautiful son Andrew, who was brainwashed by his father to think that I was crazy, that I belonged in a hospital, numbed out and silenced with drugs. Yet the whole time, there I was, hiding in plain sight, a rich white woman without a mark on my face.
I was living with my boyfriend in New Orleans, refugees from the local community college with a nicely rounded drug habit. We stopped going to class, but we were deeply loyal to each other. We had an intense relationship, either over the top, crazy happy, or full of rage and out of control. One night last winter, we were coming back from Ray's, a local watering hole. Walking to the apartment on a cold night, we got home and we had a monster fight. Greg never hit me. I was not afraid of him. That night, after a lot of screaming, he just passed out on the couch, and I don't really remember much after that. We both had been drunk and high for days. But then, somehow, Greg was in the bed, and he had a knife in his hand. A knife. Where did he get a knife? He held it at my left breast, and he raped me. He grabbed me by the hair and demanded that I drive him to Renville, where he usually scored his meth. He was like somebody I didn't know. I couldn't even recognize that rage. He tore my nightgown, and he slashed my arm with a knife, just enough to create a stream of blood. I got behind the wheel and started down Route 116. Greg kept telling me to speed up. So at one point I was going over 100 miles an hour in my old Honda on a small 2-lane highway. My window was open and I could smell night. I knew the 97, an old diner at the intersection of 116 and 48. Speeding at 90 miles an hour, I saw it on my right. In a moment charged with raw fear, without reason or thought, I turned the wheel and drove straight into the side of the diner. Smashed through the glass, the brick and mortar. The car collapsed like a sardine can. Greg pried open the passenger door and ran. I staggered through the broken glass, stunned people sitting at the counter with sunny side up hash browns and toast. They stared as I walked in my lavender nightgown covered with blood. A dead woman walking. The waitress turned to me, plates, ketchup, silverware, cups smashed on the floor, as she opened her arms. Opened her arms to a bleeding stranger. I walked into her mercy, and found a nest. So tender, it healed me.
It is 6 hours past midnight and Brown Girl treads water in ocean of neglect. Brown Girl is adopted by fearful mouse mother and a paroled snake father who slithers into her bed only to later deny the scaled scab skin he leaves behind. Brown Girl cries and tries and runs and hides to escape the snake. Brown Girl writes mouse mother an aching letter begging for help, but mouse mother rips the letter apart limb by limb. Then Brown Girl runs away to Rochelle's brother's girlfriend's house, but Mouse Mother flashes fearful fangs, hunts her down, and puts accusations in a cell marked lies. Then Brown Girl tries to fly from the 3rd floor window of Longview Elementary School, but her teacher saves her wings with still water whispers. I said Brown Girl tries and cries and runs and hides to escape the snake, but snake will not leave her bed until she bleeds. It is midnight, and with her shed blood, rivers of dreams run down her leg. Now she is 16, armed with miniskirts and tank tops and blue contacts and glittered hair, and her body has known the company of many but the comfort of none. Brown Girl is drowning with seaweed and scaled skins clogging her throat. She clamors for the rock of redemption, for the shores of safety, for water without the sting of jellyfish. Brown Girl's arms and legs are exhausted from treading water. Her legs are desperate for fresh air, and Mouse Mother is not strong enough to carry her, and Snake Father cannot change his selfish skin long enough to see straight, and she is far, far from shore. But somewhere between midnight and daybreak, between the waves of struggle and the waves of surrender, a lifeboat appears called Spirit. And Spirit is large enough to carry Brown Girl's burden. And Spirit is wide enough to carry Brown Girl's pain. And Spirit has a doctor on board who specializes in removing the venom of snakes. And Spirit has a coach on board who specializes in teaching treaders how to swim. And Spirit has an oceanographer on board who specializes in finding safe waters for brown girls. And Spirit is always right on time. I said Spirit is always right on time. And now it is daybreak, and Brown Girl is 20 and works as a lifeguard, carrying other brown girls to Spirit, leading other brown girls to Spirit, guiding other brown girls to Spirit. And Spirit is always right on time. I said Spirit is always right on time. And once again, high noon conquers midnight.
Thank you all for being here. I'm Nicole Richon-Schoel, and I'd like to start with thanking my amazing, awesome readers here who volunteered their time. Thank you. This is Cindy Sue. You just stand up. Karen Lund. Gretchen McKenna, Ross Steinborn, and Shanae Burton. I'd also like to thank the Gloucester Writers Center for offering so many people the opportunity to share their work. I wanted to say that there are 2 pieces in the play that I did not write. You may have recognized Lady Gaga's song, Till It Happens to You. And then the ending poem, Brown Girl, was written by a woman named Dr. Tama Bryant Davis. A few years ago, as she was leaving my office, a woman turned to me and said, "You carried me, you know." We had just finished talking about everything that she'd been through over the past year. Despite obstacles that many of us can only imagine, she stood on a set of stairs just a little bit above me with an unmistakable air of triumph. Not a survivor, but a victor. I didn't carry her. She lifted me. I carried her story. In the 80s, as Margot mentioned, I worked with homeless families at Wellspring House and learned pretty quickly that many of them were displaced by domestic violence. And then I worked for almost 15 years at HAWK, the local domestic violence service agency, counseling and advocating for victims and survivors. But then, at the end of the 1990s, I hit a wall. I'd been exposed to hundreds of stories of intimate and traumatic violence, told graphically and told often. The sheer volume of details from these stories made me feel like I was becoming toxic to my own self. I wasn't sleeping well, I startled easily, I was anxious too much of the time, and worst of all, I had repeated intrusive images of some of the more horrific aspects of the stories that I heard every day. I was suffering from the twin elements of empathy and exposure, also known as vicarious trauma or compassion fatigue. So I went to my supervisor at HAWK, who happens to be in the audience, and said, I need a leave of absence. So I got a month. She helped me find the time, and I spent a month sitting on my couch because that was pretty much all I could do. I was numbed out, and I was watching my own internal slideshow. The 5-year-old boy who would not go to sleep at night until he checked the locks on all the doors and windows to make sure that his mother was safe and protected from his father. The 14-year-old who tried to ask for help, but nobody was listening. The men serving time for domestic assault who just didn't understand what had happened, and then worried that their sons were going to be just like them. But I began to recognize a taproot growing within me, which now feels like part of my spinal column. I've spent many years, and probably will spend many more, doing all I can to help stop violence against women and girls. Sadly, there is no lack of opportunity to do this work. From Gloucester to Pakistan, kidnapped schoolgirls, sex trafficking, gang rapes, honor killings. I've always believed in the power of stories, long before The Moth, long before StoryCorps. I knew that there was freedom in sharing the intimate details of our lives, especially the difficult and scary ones. So there I was on my couch, trying to help myself recover from secondary trauma. And that's when I began to write the stories. A word here, a secret there, an image. They expressed a huge amount of a person's life who had endured domestic violence. And one person's story becomes universal. The stories that had traumatized me were now healing me. People who've sat in the audience of In Harm's Way, the play that Margot mentioned that toured around the North Shore in the 2000s, some of them were there seeing their own stories told on stage. And they've said to me that it was like watching a heavy curtain being pulled off of them that was smothering them. They expressed a sense of relief that even though the stories were anonymous, finally someone was saying it all out loud. A worker who helped people escape the killing fields of Cambodia once said that there is something about hearing the stories of survivors that teaches us why we live. It shakes us to hear these stories, but at the same time, we are privileged to hear another's cry and give honor and recognition to their suffering. Reaching out to survivors touches our core vulnerability and lifts us beyond ourselves. When you listen to victims and survivors of violence tell their stories, you are on sacred ground. Thank you.